I think you just scroll down in this document. You should be there. There we go. One of the first ones, and this is kind of interesting, is the ability now to surface your own error messages in a flow or in a record triggered flow. And rather than having the standard error that pops up and have a flow fail on you, you can put some logic into your flows and actually put your own custom error messages there if you need to. And these error messages will either pop up on the screen over the page that the user is working on, or they can show up on an individual field as well. And you can put multiple errors in a single one of these actions. So I think this is going to, make it much easier for folks to create trigger flows that are going to be better able to handle certain use cases or other things where there may or could possibly be a problem with whether it's bad data, missing fields, that type of thing, being able to surface that type of error message. If you go to the next page, we can take a look at the second option, which I think is kind of neat, is the pause element is going away. The pause action. There's actually going to be 3 new actions taking the place of that, and there's new wait actions, and they're just really going to make it easier to configure. You can wait to a particular date. You can wait for a particular period of time, and then you can also wait based on certain conditions. Well, waiting based on certain conditions is kind of what the old pause element did, but this allows you to, I think, configure it much easier than what the old pause element did, and I think it may make this type of action more useful to people who are creating flows. So we have a few different ways to set this up with these 8 actions. So you can create automations that will pause for a period of time or pause for a certain condition to be met before they proceed. If we go to the third item on the next page, you scroll down just a bit. This one's kind of interesting. They're starting to change in the flow builder how you configure certain elements. And eventually, all of the elements are going to be set up this way. And that's rather than when you click on an element to edit it or configure it, and having a window pop up over the screen in the flow builder, it's going to open up a panel on the side. So you're still looking at the flow canvas as well as all of the configuration attributes for the element that you're configuring. Right now, it's just create records, update records, start element, and call it a subflow. Those will have this new way of configuring them. And eventually, I think all of the elements are going to be configured this way. And the only tricky part I found with this, and I've seen people pop up online that I have no way to undo or to cancel what I'm working on, because if you start to configure, I think logically, if you want to stop what you're doing, you click on that X over on the right-hand side where I have the number 1 pointing to it. But if you really need to undo what you've started to configure, you need to go over to the left side where you have that undo arrow and click there. So it's a little confusing, I think, at first when you're working with these. And I just wanted to point that out, that there is a way to undo if you start to configure an option. It's just not where you would expect to interact with it. So they may change that in a future release, but that's the way it is right now. If you go to the next page, I'll show you another new feature coming. This one's interesting. Is when you're looking at flow list views, previously you could see a lot of information about a flow, but the only way to know what version or API version your flow was configured for was to go into the flow, click on the little gear icon and for advanced, and then you could look at what the API version was there. And this is becoming more and more important as we see these new features coming out for Flow. Is some of them will only work if you're at a certain API version or greater. So being able to see the API version now in your list view, I think is going to, just at a glance, you can go in and see what version your flows are on, and it's easier to know when you may need to go in and change a version on something. So I found that as a very helpful new feature in the winter release for Salesforce. And I have a fifth one here. We scroll down, and actually, got to say the best to last is I'm very excited about what you can do with the reactive components on flow screens. There's, in the past, if you needed to get information from the user and then act on that information in the screen flow, you had to click next to go out of the screen, do your processing in the flow, and then open up a new screen to then present the new information based on what the user may have put in the prior screen. With reactive components, you can build single screen applications that change and react on one screen without having to click between different screens. And there's a lot of power and capability here for that. And I'd like to try and share a presentation that shows just a few examples of what you can do with reactive components. I think there's really, really neat things you can do. So let me share another link. Let's see if you can open this presentation. This is actually part of a presentation that I did at Dreamforce this year with, I presented with another MVP, Michelle Hansen, and then also Adam White, who is a product manager for the Flow team at Salesforce. And what we have here is part of this presentation. I showed just a few examples of how you can, some of the interesting things you can do with reactive screens. So the page you're on right now is actually a good place to start. This is an example of what I mentioned before, which is having to jump from screen to screen to do something. Now, this is a very simple example where if you select an account and you want to see all the related contacts, previously you had to have the user select an account, click next. You could do a get records to get related contacts, and then go to a new screen and display those. With these reactive components, you can do that all on one screen. So if you click on the play button there, this should show you how this works. So we can put it in action here. There we go. So go back one slide to the previous one. Go back to slide 19. You're on slide 20 right now. Let's go back one. There you go. There. And play this one. So this is showing a data table that every time the user selects a different record, you see there's a second data table below the first one that is displaying the contacts that are related to the account that's being selected in the first data table. And it's doing that all interactively on a single screen. So if you go to the next slide, this will show you how you configure that in a flow. And it uses a special reactive component called data factor. So let's see if you can click to the next slide. There you go. Yeah, sometimes it takes one click to change data and another click to start it up. So This is a flow screen with two data tables on it. My data table component is reactive as well. And the data fetcher is a component that goes out and does a SQL query and reads in records. So if you play this video, it'll show how those components are configured. Is the output from the first data table. I have single row selection, so I'll output a single record. And based on that value that gets output from the first data table, I have a formula that is the query for the next one. And say, find all the contact records with the account ID equals the ID from the selected row from the data table. And then the data table is reacting to the output from that data fetcher component, saying, give me all the records coming from the data fetcher and display those on my data table. So every time the value changes from one data table, it changes the formula that's doing the query. It gets new records. The other data table says, oh, wait a minute, you're giving me new records. I'm going to display those instead. So continuously, you're constantly reacting to what's happening in the other components. So it allows you to do this type of logic on one screen. If you go to the next slide, I'm going to show something similar. And that is having the ability, again, to select records in the data table. We've got to go one more. There we go. Select records in the data table and then edit records. I mean, edit values of fields in the selected record. So you've got to go one more page here. Go to slide 21. And go ahead and play this, and there we go. So my data table component allows you to do inline editing, but there are a couple restrictions. There's a couple types of fields you can't do inline editing on, and this is just an example of how you can edit fields from a table by using another component. Here I'm selecting a record, but I'm editing the fields in a record detail component that's displayed underneath the data table component. So each time I select a record, it's showing me the field values from that record and allows me to edit them and save them in the component that's below the data table. So if you go to the next page, you can take a look at how that is configured as well. That would be on slide 22. So this is using the data table component and the record detail component. These are both available on unofficialsf.com. Actually, everything that you see here is available on unofficial SF. And this one, again, is using a data table with a single selection and passing the ID of the selected record into the record detail component, which is saying, here's the ID of the record, here are the fields that I want to display, and I want you to do it in edit mode. So we have the record detail component reacting to and acting on the ID of whatever record gets selected in the data table. There we go. And if you go to the next slide, I've got another example. This one will be kind of interesting. Was slide 23. This one is using a new reactive component that I created that is actually a collection processing action. And in this one, I have a component that you pass in a collection of records and the name of a field, and you tell it what you want to do, what operation you want to perform in those fields, and you can add them all up. You can do multiply them, get a count of fields, do an average, any number of these types of calculations can be done in this one action just by saying, here's my collection of records, here's the field, here's the action I want you to perform on them, and it'll return an answer to you. And this example that here on the screen, if you click play again on this little video, it shows how you can interact with the data table and select and unselect records, as well as being able to say what column or what field you want to work with and what operation you want to perform. And the reactive display text, which we see at the bottom, is going to show the result coming from that calculation action. And as the user interacts with these options on the screen or interacts with the data table, the value keeps getting updated in real time as these changes are made. And this is a kind of an interesting technique to do this. Is the action that does the calculations is already, it exists out there. It's something you can use as a standalone action in your flow, and it's part of a collection of what's called collection processors that are all these different actions you can perform on collections of records. And you can install all of these directly from Unofficial SF, and they were designed to be individual standalone actions in a flow. And so it followed the old pattern of get the information on a screen, you select your records, you select some of these other things, you click next on the screen, let this action do its work, and then go to a new screen and take what the value is coming from that action and then display it. What I've done here is I've come up with a generic way to take any standalone invocable action, like these collection processors, and turn them into reactive screen components. So I'm using the original action, but I have this reactive component that gets wrapped around it that you can put on your screen and say, go and call this action, but do all the processing with the values that I give you directly from the screen and give me the answer back, so another component of my screen can react to that value. And I've done a number of these now that made them all available as these reactive components, reactive collection processors you can put on the screen. And at Pack Dreaming coming up in a few weeks, the presentation I'm going to be doing uses a lot of these collection processors, but I'm going to be showing how they can be used when you have a complex flow with a lot of loops in it, how you can get rid of the loops and really simplify your flows by using these little actions that can work on these groups of records rather than having to loop through records individually in a flow. I've got one other interesting example. If you want to go to slide, I think 25, or it might be 24 if you just skip ahead. There we go. Yeah, go to one more slide here. And this next slide is kind of interesting. I had a project I was working on for a client where I wanted to have pick lists on a screen and have values from a pick list be dependent on other values. So this is like a dependent pick list. Depending upon what I select in one pick list, it's going to change the options in another pick list, but I wanted to do it without actual dependent pick list fields. I wanted to be able to define the dependencies in my flow. I've actually done this with custom metadata where I have records, metadata records with all the different options for the pick list. And what this reactive component is doing on the screen is it's saying, I get one value from a pick list. I use the data fetcher. I say, go get me all of my metadata records that match that value. Once I have all those records, I'm using a collection component that says, here's a field in those records. Give me a text collection back with all of the values from the records for that one field. And oh, by the way, when you do it, dedupe it so I don't have any duplicates. And pass me back a text collection of values. And that text collection of values is what I use in the next pick list to say, here are the options I want you to have in the pick list. So every time somebody makes a selection, I get a new set of records, I extract the field, and I send that on to the next pick list as here are the options I want you to show. And it's all dependent upon what gets selected in a prior option. And if you jump ahead a couple more slides, I wanted to show one more example of reactivity. And this is something I created back when reactive components first became available. I said, well, how can I use these types of reactivity? And so I wanted to create a component just as a proof of concept. I say, well, how does reactivity work? So I wanted to create something that I could use in a flow that was reactive, and I just did this as an exercise to try and make sure I could do the coding part correctly. So if you jump forward another slide or two, I'll show you what came out of that experiment. Go to slide 27 or 28, I think. There we go. Go ahead and play this one. This is a little memory game I created, and this flow just has one element in it, and it's a screen. And on that screen, I have a component that displays a card, and I put 12 of them on the screen, and I have another component that just interacts with whatever card is being clicked, and then tells the card what to display. Do you display the back of the card, the front of the card, or do you display a blank card? So this matching game just goes through that process, and it's all interacting at the same time, and it's all being done with a single flow screen. So that was just something I put together just to try and figure out how do you create a component that's going to be reactive. So I'm glad to answer any questions or any other questions about flow, about Winter 24, reactivity, anything folks are interested in. So I hope you enjoyed what you saw here.
Yes, I think there are a couple of questions, but I just wanted to share that I'm very excited when they announced the reactivity components. Adam White, when he shared that they are all working on the reactivity components, and I see you working on these components, and I'm pretty excited to start to get my hands on it.
Yeah, and hopefully what you saw here, just some of these fairly simple use cases, may give you some ideas of how you can put some of these to use for yourself, because they really can be very powerful. And I think sometimes until you see some of these use cases or some of these examples, you may not be really sure, how can I take advantage of this? What can I do with it? And with these ideas here, that as you come across a need that may benefit from this type of reactivity, then you may know where to go and how to start building that.
I think we have a question. Let me just quickly ask him the question. So the question is, can we have the reactivity components in the repeatable So basically, Adam White announced in the Dreamforce that they are the repeater component that's going to repeat the components. So, for example, if we have a row, creating a contact and adding that a button will add another component, another row. So basically, when the when do you think that the flow repeater is going to be available?
I think that probably is going to be two more releases at the earliest. I don't think we're going to see it in the next release. If we do, it'd probably be in beta format. But that is coming, and I think there's two big things they're working on now, and one is that type of repeater component, and the other one is uh, action buttons, and where what they want to do is be able to allow you to put a button on a flow screen that actually goes out and runs another flow and passes a value back without leaving the screen. So it's kind of like it's reactive. You still have to click on it and make it happen, but that's going to add a lot more power and capability, I think, to flows by being able to do that. But that may come before the repeater. I'm not really sure, but um, you can use reactivity now, and do something along the lines of, say, you want to create a new record. I think the second example I showed, where you can select a record in a data table and then edit some fields. You can do something similar by maybe having a component that creates a record, and then you can add it to a collection of records and stay on the same screen at the same time. One of the collection processors I just released as a reactive component is join collections. We can take two collections, join them together into a new one, and you probably could go and build a screen flow where every time you created that new record, you could add it to the original collection, which would update your list of records, and you just keep going with that. It's not a true repeater yet, but I think you can follow some of that logic that you would need in a repeater and actually build flows today that would do that type of processing.
Thank you, Eric, for answering this question. I think we have another question. I'll let him ask the question.
Hi, Eric. This is Amar. So, just a question for your dependent picklist component. It is catered by, I think, a custom editor, right? Is there any way we can just get the fields on the component and just show it there? So we have to like just we have don't have to go into the metadata field components, right?
What you're asking how you would configure a particular component?
Yes. Yes.
And what are you trying to accomplish with that?
So, so the thing is, my question is, can we just get the fields there? Do we have to go into the metadata and add all the values there one by one whenever we have to add a field?
Oh, which component were you
It is the
asking?
dependent pick list component.
Oh, the pick list.
Yes, the dependent pick.
The dependent pick list, it wasn't using any fields. It was actually everything was defined in metadata. If you scroll back a few slides, I think there's one slide that shows that right there, slide 26. That's just a list of records that has the various values for the pick list. So let's see if it shows there we are. So I have each column or each field is a set of values for one of my pick lists. And each record is a possible combination of those. So for each quick choice that I'm doing here, I'm getting a new collection of records that matches a certain criteria based on other selections, and then it gets displayed in the next one or passed through. So you basically define the fields in the component itself, you're saying, this is the field I want you to extract, or this is the field I want you to get the records for. So if you were trying to do something with an actual dependent pick list field, you would use a slightly different component to do that. I just wanted to show how you can do the dependency without having to have a field from a record. Because oftentimes when you're collecting information in a flow, it may not always be related to a particular field. You just want to give the user some options and say, please pick one of these options, and then we'll go and do something. And this is just one way of defining those options. I hope that answered your question.
Hello. Yes, I get it. So can we just cater with the Salesforce field and instead of customer data? Is there any other component there?
There is another component. There's on Unofficial SF, you can find a dependent pick list component where you can pass in the field and define the dependencies and do that. So that is available. It's not the quick choice component which I'm showing here, but it's a separate dependent pick list component.
Okay. Thank you so much, Eric.
Yes.
So we are asking if anyone else have any question.
Okay.
So I think we don't have any question.
All righty.
Thank you, Eric, for joining and sharing some of your magic tricks, except pulling out a rabbit out of your head.
Yes.
I personally really admire the work you have done, all the components and your work on the reactivity components. It's really amazing. And
Great. Well, I'm hoping you can put them to use.
Yes, I'm still using some of your components like quick choice, and there's another one, check validations, that
Yeah, oh,
checks.
yes. Yep.
And I think I have modified it, and I'll share it on the GitHub.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll be sharing that on the GitHub, and I'm looking forward to see you at PogGym.
I'm looking forward to taking part of that with you. So yes, so help people untangle their flows in Pack Dreaming. So it should be interesting.
So thank you, Eric. It was a really honor for me to have a conversation with you, and thank you for joining. Have a good day.
You too. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye,
Have a nice
everybody.
day. Bye.